In the first few sections of insecticide resistance, we have seen what is insecticide resistance, what are the factors contributing to the development of resistance, what are the mechanisms of resistance, that all things we've seen in detail. In yesterday's class, we've seen the methods of detection of yesterday, and day before yesterday's class, we've seen methods of detection of resistance. And yesterday's class itself, we have started with insecticide resistance management, and we will finish with insecticide resistance management today. Okay, so what are the, I will just refresh with what we had learned in the last class. What are the three strategies put forth by Giorgio for insecticide resistance management?
Management by moderation,
Ah,
management by saturation,
ah,
and management using
by
synergy.
multiple attack. Yes. So the after that we have seen the strategies given by Rausch and Daly. In Rausch and Daly, they have mainly discussed with what one strategy was to reduce the fitness of the resistant individuals, and the second strategy was to decrease the selection pressure. So we'll see it one by one. We have seen the points, what are those, and we will see discuss in detail all those things. I'll share the PPT. So can you see the PPT? Can you see it?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay. So reduce the fitness of resistant individuals and decreasing the selection pressure. So first we will see the strategies in reducing the fitness of resistant individuals. So the first strategy is to, yesterday as one of you have pointed out, is to increase the dose to kill all the resistant individuals, including homozygous resistant individuals as well as the heterozygous ones carrying the resistant genes. But this has certain things. If this strategy is to adopted, we have to have certain things in mind. The first thing is the number of individuals with resistant genes should be very low, because if we have large population of resistant individuals, we won't be able to kill all the resistant individuals, even the resistant homozygotes or heterozygotes. So only this strategy will work only when the resistance frequency is low. And uh, one thing we have to ensure is that we have to cover the entire area. We have to treat the entire area so that the entire population is exposed to the pesticide. It's in a cropping scenario, this is a bit difficult task, especially in the case of hidden pests like borers, leaf folders, etc. It's a bit difficult. And so these are the two things. One thing is the resistance frequency should be low. That means the number of individuals with resistance genes should be low. Second thing is we should ensure thorough coverage so that none of the individuals with resistant genes should escape the treatment. And the major disadvantage associated with, you can understand, if you are increasing the dose heavily, it will have its own environmental cost. It will increase the cost, it will leave pesticide residues, it will have its own environmental consequences. And another thing is that if you're going for higher dose of pesticide, the residue of that pesticide will last in that particular crop for a longer period. I will repeat, if you are using the recommended dose is 2 ml per liter, and you are using a higher dose, that means 5 ml per liter. If you are using 5 ml per liter, the pesticide residue will remain in the crop for a longer duration compared to the recommended dose. If the residue persists in the crop for a longer period, any insect, any susceptible individual flying into the sprayed area will get killed because of the residue. that location. So that is again one disadvantage. So this strategy, I don't think anywhere it is adopted because normally resistance development happens in large populations. So it's not that easy to adopt this strategy. And uh, to conclude, this strategy will work in those populations where resistance is not such a big problem. The number of individuals with resistance is pretty low, and where we can apply the pesticide uniformly and we can tightly control the dose. Then only we can adopt this strategy. So usually this strategy doesn't have much practical relevance. Then we can use compounds that can confer lower levels of resistance. Yesterday we have discussed it slightly. I told you in our experiment itself, in FCA codon, they were using malathion, dichlorose, and deltamethrin, but development of resistance was higher for malathion. So similarly, the case of cyclodienes, dieldrin easily develop resistance, while lindane development of resistance is a very slow. Among the carbamates, pirmicarb develops resistance slowly, whereas dimethones methyl, that is, these are all old chemicals. Dimethones methyl is an OP insecticide, uh, develops resistance pretty fast. So, uh, chemical compound wise also resistance development, the rate of development of resistance varies. The next point is with the most vulnerable stage of the insect that we have discussed several times, especially with respect to Helicoverpa. So in the early instas, Helicoverpa, even if the individual Helicoverpa larvae is having the resistant gene, it will get killed by the insecticide. Only in the later stages, the resistance will be expressed more. So when you are going for a prey, ensure that the insect is at the most susceptible stage. That's why if you see a cotton IPM, the cotton IPM, the first thing is there will be monitoring of population, pink bollworm and Helicoverpa amigera population with pheromone trap, isn't it? You might have studied, especially Bindu Safna has worked on cotton itself, isn't it? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So in a IPM in cotton, if you are detecting female moths, no, male moths in the pheromone trap, you have to spray it. You have to take up the sprays on the fifth day of the detection of male moth. So you're keeping installing ping bollworm pheromone trap and Helicoverpa amigera pheromone trap. And after a few days, today you installed it last week. Today you got a trap catch. Then today is 22nd. You have to spray on 25th or 27th or 28th. That means if you have got moths trapped in the pheromone trap, there will have been emergence of the moths. They must have been mated. They must have laid their eggs. So they will lay their eggs. Say today, if they mate today, tomorrow on 23rd they will lay the eggs. So within 3 days, eggs will hatch. 23 plus 3, 26. So 27th or 28th, if you go for the spray, or 28th or 29th, if you go for the spray, it will be in the first instance. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is how normally we can go for this particular resistant management strategy in the field. Actually, this is what it is recommended by CSCR Nagpur for resistance management also. Coming to the next one, that is use of synergies to suppress detoxification mechanism. As we told yesterday, pipronal butoxide and all, it will block the resistant mechanism. And this will work only if the resistance is due to a particular mechanism alone. I told you, if there is a stress, then only we can go for pypronal protection. Another thing is that synergies will not work against target site insensitivity because that is mutation. Synergies can't block that mutated gene. So this works only when the enzymatic detoxification is the mechanism of resistance, and mainly one enzyme is responsible for the detoxification of pesticide. So imagine there is a pesticide and that pesticide is detoxified by increased levels of esterase and glutathione transferase. Then we have to mix two synergies because one synergist will work against esterase and another synergist we need against glutathione transferase. So both it's not easy to formulate. So usually it will work only when we have a single biochemical mechanism of resistance. Coming to the next one, that is insecticide mixtures. So mixtures are now widely being marketed by pesticide companies, mainly because they are of the view that they can delay the development of resistance. Say, and certain things nowadays we have a combination of Syngenta has come out with a combination of chlorantraniliprole plus thiamethoxam. Uh, One advantage is one is lepidopteran specific, another one is sucking pest specific. So if you have a combination of both, then we can save the cost and time. Because if you have an infestation of both sucking pest and a lepidopteran pest, go for that. But there are certain other combination which doesn't have much practical relevance or some scientific judgment. I didn't don't see much scientific judgment in many of the combination. They simply mix it, they will market it. The problem with mixtures is that I will discuss with a bit elaborately later. Because if one insect has evolved resistant to a particular insecticide, even if you mix with another pesticide, it may not work always. Because take the case of mixed function oxidases. If the resistance is due to mixed function oxidases, we have discussed several times, it has broad substrate specificity. If it has due to the high levels of mixed function oxidases, even if you introduce a mixture, it may have the ability to detoxify both insecticides in the mixture. So mixtures may not work usually. Sometimes it may work, but we have to choose it judiciously based on solid scientific principles. So the major reason why mixtures are discussed, suggested as a resistant management strategy is because very rarely insects have gene coding for resistance to pesticides belonging to different mode of action. Say one insect has evolved resistance to organochlorine, another insect, the same insect. It is not that easy for that insect to develop resistance to organophosphate as well as carbapenems because both organochlorine sodium channel modulator, organophosphate is acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. So gaining resistance to both these two group of insecticides with different mode of action, it's not that easy. So it's there that we have certain instances where insects are evolved resistance to different insecticides with different modes of action, but it's very rare. That's the basic reason why insecticides mixtures are recommended against insecticide resistance. But most of the time, it may not work effectively for resistance management. Next is reducing the. We have discussed all these five strategies for in the first way, that is reducing the fitness of the resistant individuals, and coming to the next, reducing the selection pressure. And the first strategy is to reduce the dose of pesticide spray. So our intention is to leave a few susceptible individuals in the field. That means does not cause the mortality of all the individuals. Some susceptible individuals, we will allow them to survive so that these susceptible individuals can breed with the resistant individuals and can slow down the development of resistance. But it may not work properly. If you tell a farmer to reduce the dose so that some insects will survive in the field, so that they can breed among them, so the farmer will not allow this kind of strategies, because if insects are surviving, there will be damage. So practically, this strategy also does not have much relevance. And the next one is reducing the number of pesticide. That's we normally recommend the farmers. In some cases, farmers go for, in case of certain in Kerala, in certain crops such as mango, within a span of about 2 months, farmers may go for about 7 to 8 spray. We usually advise the farmers to decrease the sprays to 2 to 3. We can manage the pest with 2 to 3 sprays. So that is one way. And another strategy is fixing a higher ATL. I will take the scenario. So if the ETL is, if the market value of the produce, say if mangoes are, the market value of mangoes is 150 kg, 150 rupees per kg, and in another scenario, the value of the produce is 25 rupees per kg. Mango, in one year it was 150 rupees per kg, and in another year it was 25 rupees per kg. So in those scenarios, where we have low ETL and where we have high ETL.
Low ETL, high price.
Low ETL will be there with high price. Good. So this is what usually happens in uh, field, farmers field. Farmers, what they usually do is, if they have a very high price, if the prevailing market price for the produce is extremely high, farmers will go for continuous spray of pesticide. They usually doesn't want to lose even a single mango. That's what we usually observe. So, I will take the mangoes because I am working with the mango farmers for the last 3 to 4 years. So what we have observed is they will take lease. The traders, usually the traders take the mango orchard on lease for a year. For a year, the lease amount will come to about 2.5 to 3 lakh per acre. 2.5 to 3 lakh per acre. The lease amount alone, if the mango orchard is extremely good, the mango orchard is maintained with badly, then the lease amount may reduce. But average it is 2.5 lakh in the area, in Palakkad area where mango is commercially cultivated. And the trader who took the orchard on lease will incur about again a 2.5 to 3 lakhs for pesticide spray, harvesting, all the cultural operations and all. That means all around he may incur about 5 lakhs per acre, and he will realize an income of about 10 lakh or 11 lakh. 8 to 10 lakh, that's the usual. Minimum they will make about 8 lakh. So this was the economics of mango trade in that Palakkad area. But now for the last 2 to 3 years, the prices, especially after Corona, the price crashed. So what this farmers did, they abandoned the crop. They, for the last few sprays, they completely avoided, because if they sprayed, it will add to the loss because the price of the commodities. So though we can advise the farmers to reduce the number of pesticide applications, if the price of the commodity is low, farmers will invariably go for greater number of pesticide sprays. So that is one thing which we face when we work with farmers in the field. Though we can recommend that only if in certain cases, in certain farmers which has the ability to reason, which thinks about the scenario completely, then they only adopt this kind of strategies. And use of pesticide with short residual activity, that means use pesticide with shorter persistence. That is one easy way to reduce the selection pressure, because if you are using persistent insecticides, the selection pressure is increased, and it is similar to having say if a pesticide persists for about 30 or 45 days, it is just like repeating if spraying a pesticide which has a persistence of 10 days 3 or 4 times. Imagine a pesticide is having a persistence of 1 month. It is just like another pesticide which with a persistence of 10 days spraying thrice in a month. Both are same. So ideally we should go for pesticides with short residual activity. And this strategy also we have discussed, especially in the case of bt and all. We advise to go for a refuge, wherein we leave an area which is unsprayed, or in bt cotton we will have an area uh, with non-bt cotton. What is the strategy now adopted, whether now we have refugia, or what is the strategy for delaying combating BT cotton resistance? Do
Gene
you know?
pyramiding.
Yes. What they do? What is the
Gene pyramiding.
gene pyramiding is one. That is just like gene pyramiding is nothing but our insecticide mixtures. Okay. In the case of insecticide, no, I'm telling about refugia. Whether now farmers are advised to keep one area for non-BT cotton. Is it the strategy now recommended?
The mixing with the main crop.
Mixing, yes. What is the government recommendation? Mixing is correct, and how the government
20%.
eh?
20%.
20%. How it is adopted?
So 20% of normal local seeds is mixed with hybrid. That
Yes,
is BT
good.
seeds.
Yes, yes, yeah. Earlier, what the guidance for seed companies was to provide a packet of BT cotton, and inside along with that packet they should provide non-BT seeds also. So what the farmers did was they threw the non-BT seed away and planted only the BT cotton varieties. Actually, it was meant for the non-BT cotton was meant for planting as a refuge. So the government changed the policy, and now BT and non-BT. I don't exactly remember the exact percentage of non-BT cotton. So it is non-BT cotton seeds is mixed along with BT cotton seeds, so that the selection pressure can be reduced. It will act as a refuge instead of a designated area to be maintained as refuge. So it will help to then help in the survival of susceptible individuals. And again, for spot application, that also we discussed in the previous class for rice BPH, rice leaf folder, etc. We can go for spot application of pesticides. Then coming to pesticide rotation, that means we have to rotate the pesticide. We can use pesticides with different mode of action. Instead of continuously using one particular pesticide, you have to rotate the pesticides with different uh, uh, mode of action. So this rotations is usually short term in nature. That means say, if you have seen cotton IPM, they have a window approach. That means in the early cropping season, they will recommend a particular group of pesticide. In the second stage of the crop, from the once the flowering starts, they will have another set of pesticide. And in the late stage, last stage only, they usually recommend pyrethroids. Pyrethroids are not recommended in the first stage. So at different stages of the crop, different pesticides with different mode of actions are recommended. So it's a short-term rotation. Within a crop, we rotate the pesticide. Another strategy is long-term rotation. That means if a pesticide company is having different molecule with different mode of action, they go for sequential introduction. That means they will introduce a particular molecule with a particular mode of action this year. Then after 5 years or 7 years, they will introduce the next molecule with a different mode of action. So that by the time by 5 or 6 years, the first molecule might have slowly developed resistance. Then the second molecule is introduced. Then it can break that resistance. So this kind of strategy, sequential introduction, is also can also be adopted, but that's not an easy thing because companies doesn't have that much products in the pipeline. Or we can go for rotating the pesticides across the space, which is also called as mosaic. Imagine you have an area of 100 acres or 10 acres. In 2.5 acre, 1 hectare of area, you can spray an OP insecticide. In another 2.5 acre area, you can go for a spray of a synthetic pyrethroid. In another 2.5 acre, you can go for another pesticide with, say, fipronil, a phenyl pyrazole. So, in different area, you spray different pesticides with different mode of action. This is called as rotating the pesticides across the space. It is also called as mosaic because in different parts of the cropped area, we spray different pesticides with different mode of action. And pesticide rotation is more effective than mosaics. Mosaic is not that uh, effective. Theoretically, it may work, but practically, it's very difficult. So this is about rotation of pesticides. So anything with respect to this, we are completing the Roshan Valley Western management strategies. Okay, now I'll finish within 10 more minutes. In 2012, Food and Agriculture Organization has given an elaborate insecticide resistant management strategy. The beauty of FAO recommendation is they considered in this resistance management in a large canvas. It was not on a smaller scale, it was on a larger scale, and they have come across some of most of the things may overlap with what we have studied with Roshan Valley strategy. But FAO, there are certain things which stands apart, which views the resistance management holistically. So the first and foremost thing FAO stated is that insecticide resistance management should be a part of IPM. That is the first thing. That's what I told. FAO has treated resistance management holistically. That means if you adopt IPM, that is nothing but adoption of insecticide resistance management, except introduce a few things, just like I told in cotton. Adopt IPM. In that IPM, if you are recommending a pesticide, that pesticide should be chosen in a judicious manner according to the principles of insecticide resistance management. So it should be incorporated into IPM and it should not be separate. IPM should usually what happens, one person will adopt IPM, another person will adopt resistance management. No, both should go hand in hand, and insecticide resistance management should be a part of IPM. And the second thing, what FAO suggested is, usually what we do is, once the resistance is detected, then we go for resistance management program. Should not be. Whenever a new pesticide molecule with a new mode of action is introduced, we should start prevention and management programs for insecticide resistance. Should not be the reverse. Once you detect it, then go for management. No. It should be from the beginning when the pesticide is introduced in the market. And the third thing, that's why I told you, FAO has uh, as a broader picture compared to other strategies. Focus on the pest and not on the crop. I told you in the previous few classes about Helicoverpa. That is the example I took several times. Helicoverpa, normally what we say, CSIR Nagpur will give an IPM strategy incorporating insecticide resistance management for Helicoverpa in cotton. But the neighboring farmer who grows PGNP, he also has Helicoverpa infestation. He doesn't follow any insecticide resistance management. What is the fun in adopting resistance management only in cotton? A neighboring farmer repeatedly going for a pesticide spray for managing Helicoverpa without adopting any resistance management, doesn't work. So usually what happens is that I told you in the first crop it will be in cotton Helicoverpa, second crop it will be in chickpea, third crop it will be in vegetables. CSIR Nagpur gives a IPM strategy including resistance management strategy for cotton. Yes, fine. For kharif it is fine. Then what about rabi and summer? Again Helicoverpa is there. Again farmer will go for repeated sprays of pesticide. There won't be any reduction in the resistance level. So our focus should be on the pest, not on crops. That's what normally we do. Cotton IPM, cotton IRM, no, it shouldn't be. It should be resistance management in Helicoverpa. Then we should address all these three crops. We should address all the farmers which are growing, not only cotton farmers, pigeon pea farmers, chickpea farmers, vegetable farmers, all. Then the next one is don't consider, that's what we have discussed now also, consider the adjacent host crops also. Say pigeon pea and cotton, first crop, both may be grown at an adjacent field. So we have to consider both the host crops and adopt the strategies in both the crops, and as much as possible protect beneficial organisms, parasitoids, predators that you all know. Try to go for selective pesticides. Nowadays we have selective pesticides, diamides, neonicotinoids, etc. Then if available, go for non-chemical pest management measures. Avoid chemical management measures. In many crops, we may have some non-chemical pest management measures. Say Helicoverpa, we can go for BT sprays. It can't be recommended now because we have already BT cotton in the field, and don't recommend BT sprays in that scenario because both selection pressure will be enhanced. So avoid BT sprays in cotton. But if you have in chickpea and vegetables in second crop and third crop, go for BT sprays. But if you have having a problem of BT resistance, then you should avoid BT spray. Then you can go for NPV. So consider alternate non-chemical pest management strategies. Then use more pesticides with different mode of action that we have discussed several times. And consider the pesticides used in an entire year, not only in the cropping season. Take the case of an imaginary scenario for explaining this point. Take the case of root grub. Your root grub is an annual pest from say July, August to about May. The grubs will be in the soil. Grubs and pupae will be in the soil. So for the management of grubs, we will be recommending chlorpyrifos drenching in the soil. So the grubs are already exposed to chlorpyrifos several times in the previous larval stage. At the adult stage, which emerges during May, June with the first pre-monsoon showers, the adults will be congregating in a few trees. Again, you are going for a spraying of chlorpyrifos. So the larval stage is exposed to chlorpyrifos, again adult is again exposed to chlorpyrifos. So this kind of treatment should be avoided. The larvae may be treated at a different time, adult may be treated at a different time, but if you're treating both the pesticides, both the stages at the same pesticide, then the chances of development of resistance will be pretty high. Then the next one is apply only the recommended applications rate. That means what is the rate at which pesticide should be used. That's only should be used. Involve all stakeholders, including farmers. A major stakeholder in all those things is dealers. Pesticide dealers are the one who usually push a particular kind of pesticide in the market. So scientists, extension workers, okay, already they will be there, but farmers, they may consider farmers also, but pesticide companies and dealers, they also should be part of it. And whenever we are adopting a precision management program, concurrently evaluate it. That means evaluate the resistant management program and refine it. If we find any fault with the program, refine it and adopt it in a refined manner, so that in between we can call it as a mid course correction. We can incorporate a mid course mid course correction so that it is introduced in an effective manner. Then rotations or alternation of unrelated pesticide that we have discussed, rotations. Then use mixtures with caution. This is what FAO also says. Mixtures are recommended only in limited situations, and incorrect use of mixtures can increase resistance. So that's what FAO also say. If the insect has evolved resistance to one particular pesticide with a particular mode of action, you should not use a mixture containing any pesticide with that mode of action to which insect has already evolved resistance. I will tell with an example. Say one insect aphid has evolved resistance to imidacloprid. Then you should not try to manage that imidacloprid resistance with a pesticide mixture containing imidacloprid and an organophosphate, or imidacloprid and a synthetic pyrethroid, or thiamethoxam and a synthetic pyrethroid, or acetamiprid and a synthetic pyrethroid, because that mixture contains group of pesticide to which already the insect has evolved resistance. And if you're having a combination of two molecules, the two molecules should be used at the recommended rate. That means usually what I will take an example. What is the usual recommendation of chlorpyrifos?
2.5.
2.5. Chlorpyrifos, what is the formulation? 2.5 ml we use. Normal formulation available in the market. Chlorpyrifos, how much percentage?
25% EC.
How much? It's 20%. It's 20% EC usually. So we have a formulation of insecticide mixture formulation of chlorpyrifos plus cypermethrin. Chlorpyrifos, it is in that mixture it is 50%, and cypermethrin is 2.5 or 5%. Cypermethrin 10%, that is the usual one which we get. It is usually recommended at the rate of 0.5 ml per liter. So if we have chlorpyrifos 50% and cypermethrin at cypermethrin is usually recommended at 1 ml per liter, 10 EC. Cypermethrin 10 EC is recommended at 1 ml per liter, and the combination is I still remember chlorpyrifos 50% plus cypermethrin 10%. Cypermethrin 1% remains the same, because cypermethrin 10% is usually the individual product is sprayed at the rate of 1 ml per liter. Chlorpyrifos, instead of 20% which we usually use in the mixture, it is 50%. So here we will use only 1 ml of the mixture because it has a higher concentration of chlorpyrifos. Understood? I will repeat again. Chlorpyrifos 20 is the usual insecticide which is recommended. It is recommended at the rate of 2.5 ml per liter. Cypermethrin, it is 10% EC, which is usually recommended at the rate of 1 ml per liter. Okay, that is the case of two separate insecticides. We are mixing chlorpyrifos and cypermethrin. In the mixture which is usually available, chlorpyrifos concentration is 50%. That means 2.5 times higher concentration. Cypermethrin concentration remains the same, 10%. So 10% cypermethrin contains, we usually recommend the 1 ml. So 1 ml. If you take the mixture 1 ml, it will have the same impact of cypermethrin 10% DC and chlorpyrifos 20% DC. Understood? Because in the mixture we are having a 2.5 times higher concentration of chlorpyrifos. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So it should be applied even in the mixture. It should be applied at the recommended rate, and both the pesticides which is mixed together in an insecticide mixture should have similar residual activity. That means if the pesticide chlorpyrifos persists for 10 days, cypermethrin also should persist for 10 days. Usually it's not so. Cypermethrin persists for hardly 3 to 5 days and chlorpyrifos persists for about 10 to 12 days. So that's why I feel most of the times these insecticide mixtures are not that scientifically prepared. Then synergis should be used with caution. I told it's not effective against target site insensitivity. And for combating insecticide resistance, we can use non-specific products. Soap, insecticidal soap. Nowadays, insecticidal soaps are available. Mineral oil is available. We have found, Hasina Madam has found horticulture mineral oil as very effective against mites. Now, insecticidal soaps are available in the market now in online and all. We have, oh, I forgot the name. I forgot the name. One particular insecticidal soap is now marketed by Pest Control India. It is available online in Amazon. Also, it is available. It's very effective against Achimedes. I'm trying it in my kitchen garden, and apply all the products with care. We should take extra precaution and monitor problematic pests which has a history of developing resistance critically. So these are the things which has been recommended by FAO. So we are coming to end of insecticide resistance portion also. Need to clarify any doubts you can ask.